When she told me she was pregnant, I froze. It was one of those moments where time seems to stop, like the world itself takes a deep breath, waiting for your reaction. Most men might expect that kind of news to spark excitement, fear, or at the very least a rush of adrenaline. But for me, it was none of those things. I didn't feel joy, I didn't feel panic, I didn't even feel nervous. Instead, I felt this heavy wave of doubt settle in my chest, as if the truth had already whispered itself to me before I even had time to fully process what she was saying. Because deep down, in the deepest corner of my gut, I knew there was no way that child could be mine. Her face glowed with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen in her in a long time. She stood in front of me, holding her stomach like she was cradling a fragile secret, her eyes searching my face for a reaction. And I did what I always did. I forced a smile. My lips moved, but my heart wasn't in it. I told her, "Wow, that's amazing news." But inside, a different voice was screaming, "No, this isn't right. Something doesn't add up." I had always imagined the day I'd find out I was going to be a father. I thought it would be filled with pure joy, maybe even tears. I pictured myself wrapping my arms around my wife, telling her how much I loved her and promising to be the best dad I could be. But the reality was nothing like that dream. Instead, feeling like I was stepping into one of life's greatest blessings, it felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss of uncertainty. Because the truth is, our relationship had been rocky for months before that moment. It wasn't one big fight or one big betrayal that changed things. No, it was a slow erosion, like a shoreline being eaten away by the tide. Little things had been piling up, things I had tried to ignore because love makes you blind, or at least it makes you want to be blind. It started with late-night texts. I would see her phone light up at midnight or later, and when I'd casually ask who it was, she would brush it off with a vague answer. Just a friend from work, or my cousin needed something. But the way she'd turn her screen slightly away from me told me otherwise. I tried not to press. I wanted to trust her. I told myself I was overthinking, that maybe I was just being insecure. Then came the sudden business trips. She didn't work in a job that required travel, at least not often, but suddenly she had to be away for days at a time, staying overnight in cities just far enough away to be inconvenient. When I asked for details, what meetings, what clients, her answers were vague, almost rehearsed. And when she came home, she acted tired, distant, and oddly defensive. If I asked too many questions, she'd snap, telling me I didn't trust her, telling me I was paranoid. And maybe she was right. Maybe I was paranoid. But the whispers I'd catch when she was on the phone, the way conversations would suddenly stop the second I walked into the room, it all painted a picture I didn't want to see. Still, I pushed it aside, convincing myself that relationships go through rough patches, that love was about weathering storms together. But when she stood there that night, telling me she was pregnant, all those ignored red flags came rushing back like a tidal wave. My mind started doing the math before I even realized it. The timelines didn't make sense. I thought about the night she was away, the weeks when she claimed she was too tired for intimacy, the days she came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, and the date she gave for when she thought she conceived. They lined up almost perfectly with one of her so-called business trips. I nodded and pretended to share her joy, but inside, I was drowning in suspicion. My hands felt cold, my heart pounded in my chest, and I kept thinking, if this child isn't mine, then whose is it? I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted so badly to believe her, to believe that maybe I was wrong, maybe I was just being insecure, maybe the universe was giving us a fresh start in the form of a baby. I looked at her smiling face, the way she touched her stomach like it already carried her whole world, and part of me felt guilty for doubting her. What kind of man questions the woman he loves in a moment like this? But the doubts wouldn't leave me. They clung to me like shadows, following me everywhere. That night, when she finally fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of the last few months in my mind. Every unanswered text, every unexplained trip, every time I tried to hold her close and she pulled away. It all added up to one painful possibility, that she was carrying another man's child. The next morning, she woke up glowing, as if a new purpose had filled her life. She talked about baby names, about nursery colors, about doctor's appointments. She asked me if I wanted to come with her to her first ultrasound. I smiled and said, of course I did. But inside my stomach twisted. How could I walk into a doctor's office and see a child on that screen, knowing deep down it might not be mine? I started paying closer attention after that. I noticed how she guarded her phone even more, keeping it face down whenever she wasn't using it. I noticed how she smiled when she thought I wasn't looking, like she was carrying a secret joy that had nothing to do with me. And I noticed how every time I tried to bring up my own excitement or my own feelings about becoming a dad, she would deflect, changing the subject as if my involvement wasn't as important. Still, I stayed quiet. I didn't confront her, not yet. I told myself I needed proof, because suspicion alone wasn't enough. If I accused her without evidence, I'd be the villain, the paranoid husband who couldn't trust his wife. And if, by some chance, I was wrong, if the baby really was mine, then my doubts would destroy us forever. So I waited. I watched. And I carried my doubts in silence, while she planned for a future I wasn't sure belonged to me. Every night, as she talked about baby clothes and cribs, I nodded and played along. But in the back of my mind, a single thought echoed louder than anything else. She's pregnant, but it can't be mine. The next morning, I sat at the edge of our bed, staring at the woman I once believed was my entire future. She was still asleep, her breathing steady, one hand resting protectively on her stomach as if shielding the secret inside her. For a moment, I felt this strange pull, an instinctive urge to reach out, to place my palm over hers, to feel connected to what she claimed was my child. But my hand froze mid-air, because every time I looked at her now, I saw nothing but betrayal wrapped in a smile. The truth that message revealed was like a splinter stuck deep in my chest. It didn't matter how much I tried to shift my focus, it was always there, sharp and impossible to ignore. I didn't say anything to her right away. Some people explode the second they find evidence, but not me. My silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. I needed more than just a single text to confirm everything. Maybe, in some twisted way, I still hoped I was wrong. Maybe that message wasn't what it seemed. But deep down, I already knew. A man doesn't forget the subtle way his gut whispers when something isn't right, and mine had been screaming for months. At breakfast, she acted like everything was normal. She poured herself orange juice, set 2 plates down, and kissed my cheek like the perfect partner. She even joked about baby names, throwing out suggestions like Ethan and Sophia, watching me for reactions. I nodded, but my mind wasn't on names. It was on lies. Every laugh she faked, every word she spoke, sounded hollow to me now. And when her phone buzzed on the counter, I noticed how fast she reached for it, like a soldier guarding a weapon. That's when I started paying closer attention. If I was going to confront her, I wanted my case airtight. I became a shadow in my own home. I memorized her patterns, the times she locked herself in the bathroom, the way she always angled her phone screen away from me, and the quiet phone calls where her voice softened in a way it never did with me anymore. It wasn't paranoia, it was observation, and every observation built a wall between us. I began checking the small things too. Receipts left in her purse from places she claimed not to have gone. Her sudden interest in prenatal yoga classes that conveniently lasted late into the evening. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me anymore. She thought I wasn't noticing. She thought I was the blind fool, still wrapped in the comfort of denial. But I was watching, always watching. The breaking point came one afternoon when she said she had a doctor's appointment and told me not to bother coming. It's just routine stuff, she insisted. But something about the way she said it made me suspicious. So I followed her, not close enough to be obvious, but far enough to keep her in my sights. She didn't drive toward the clinic we had gone to together before. No, she drove across town, parked front of a coffee shop, and walked inside. A few minutes later, a man joined her. He wasn't just some random acquaintance. I could see it in the way they greeted each other, in the way his hand instinctively touched hers across the table. There was a softness between them, an intimacy that no one could fake. And when he reached over and placed his palm gently on her stomach, my blood turned to ice. That was it. Proof. Solid, undeniable proof. I wanted to storm in right then, flip the table, demand answers. But instead, I stood frozen outside the glass, watching the life I thought I had built collapse in real time. People always say betrayal feels like a knife, but this wasn't a sharp pain. It was dull, suffocating, like someone had placed a weight on my chest I couldn't lift. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare through that window, wondering how many other moments like this they had shared while I sat at home, oblivious. When she got home that night, she acted as if everything was normal. She poured herself orange juice, set 2 plates down, and kissed my cheek like the perfect partner. She even joked about baby names, throwing out suggestions like Ethan and Sophia, watching me for reactions. I nodded, but my mind wasn't on names. It was on lies. Every laugh she faked, every word she spoke, sounded hollow to me now. And when her phone buzzed on the counter, I noticed how fast she reached for it, like a soldier guarding a weapon. That's when I started paying closer attention. If I was going to confront her, I wanted my case airtight. I became a shadow in my own home. I memorized her patterns, the times she locked herself in the bathroom, the way she always angled her phone screen away from me, and the quiet phone calls where her voice softened in a way it never did with me anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It was observation. And every observation built a wall between us. I began checking the small things, too. Receipts left in her purse from places she claimed not to have gone. Her sudden interest in prenatal yoga classes that conveniently lasted late into the evening. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me anymore. She thought I wasn't noticing. She thought I was the blind fool, still wrapped in the comfort of denial. But I was watching, always watching. The breaking point came one afternoon when she said she had a doctor's appointment and told me not to bother coming. It's just routine stuff, she insisted. But something about the way she said it made me suspicious. So I followed her, not close enough to be obvious, but far enough to keep her in my sights. She didn't drive toward the clinic we had gone to together before. No, she drove across town, parked front of a coffee shop, and walked inside. A few minutes later, a man joined her. He wasn't just some random acquaintance. I could see it in the way they greeted each other, in the way his hand instinctively touched hers across the table. There was a softness between them, an intimacy that no one could fake. And when he reached over and placed his palm gently on her stomach, my blood turned to ice. That was it. Proof. Solid, undeniable proof. I wanted to storm in right then, flip the table, demand answers. But instead, I stood frozen outside the glass, watching the life I thought I had built collapse in real time. People always say betrayal feels like a knife, but this wasn't a sharp pain. It was dull, suffocating, like someone had placed a weight on my chest I couldn't lift. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think.
All I could do was stare through that window, wondering how many other moments like this they had shared while I sat at home, oblivious. When she got home that night, she acted as if everything was normal. She poured herself orange juice, set 2 plates down, and kissed my cheek like the perfect partner. She even joked about baby names, throwing out suggestions like Ethan and Sophia, watching me for reactions. I nodded, but my mind wasn't on names. It was on lies. Every laugh she faked, every word she spoke, sounded hollow to me now. And when her phone buzzed on the counter, I noticed how fast she reached for it, like a soldier guarding a weapon. That's when I started paying closer attention. If I was going to confront her, I wanted my case airtight. I became a shadow in my own home. I memorized her patterns, the times she locked herself in the bathroom, the way she always angled her phone screen away from me, and the quiet phone calls where her voice softened in a way it never did with me anymore. It wasn't paranoia, it was observation, and every observation built a wall between us. I began checking the small things too. Receipts left in her purse from places she claimed not to have gone. Her sudden interest in prenatal yoga classes that conveniently lasted late into the evening. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me anymore. She thought I wasn't noticing. She thought I was the blind fool, still wrapped in the comfort of denial. But I was watching, always watching.
The breaking point came one afternoon when she said she had a doctor's appointment and told me not to bother coming. It's just routine stuff, she insisted. But something about the way she said it made me suspicious. So I followed her. Not close enough to be obvious, but far enough to keep her in my sights. She didn't drive toward the clinic we had gone to together before. No, she drove across town, parked in front of a coffee shop, and walked inside. A few minutes later, a man joined her. He wasn't just some random acquaintance. I could see it in the way they greeted each other, in the way his hand instinctively touched hers across the table. There was a softness between them, an intimacy that no one could fake. And when he reached over and placed his palm gently on her stomach, my blood turned to ice. That was it. Proof. Solid, undeniable proof. I wanted to storm in right then, flip the table, demand answers. But instead, I stood frozen outside the glass, watching the life I thought I had built collapse in real time. People always say betrayal feels like a knife, but this wasn't a sharp pain. It was dull, suffocating, like someone had placed a weight on my chest I couldn't lift. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare through that window, wondering how many other moments like this they had shared while I sat at home, oblivious. When she got home that night, she acted as if nothing had happened. She kissed me, asked me about my day, and curled up beside me on the couch. And I played along, not because I forgave her, but because I wasn't ready to reveal what I knew. I wanted to see how far she'd take the lies, how deep she'd dig the hole. Every false word that left her mouth was another shovel of dirt covering whatever love we once had. Lying there beside her, I thought about the future, about the child she was carrying, about the man who would one day hold that child and claim what was his. And then there was me, left with nothing but the role of a spectator in my own life. The man she betrayed, the man she deceived, the man she wanted to raise another man's baby without ever admitting the truth. That's when the anger started. At first it had been sorrow, heartbreak, numbness. But slowly, rage began to rise in me. Not just at her, but at myself, for trusting too much, for ignoring the signs, for clinging to the hope that love could fix everything. Love couldn't fix this. Nothing could. But I still needed answers. I needed her to look me in the eye and admit it. Not just because I deserved the truth, but because she owed it to me, to us, to whatever shred of respect might remain. So, I made a decision. I wouldn't stay silent forever. The confrontation was coming, and when it did, there would be no turning back. But even as I planned what I'd say, as I rehearsed the questions that burned on my tongue, one thought haunted me. What if she denied it? What if she looked me dead in the eye and swore I was wrong? Could I live with that? Could I stay with a woman who carried another man's child, knowing she'd never confess? Or would I finally have to walk away from everything we had built, even if it left me broken? That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I stayed awake staring at the ceiling. My hand rested on my chest, feeling my own heartbeat pound like a war drum. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was about betrayal on the deepest level imaginable. A child changes everything. And this child, the one she carried inside her, wasn't mine. It was his, and nothing in the world could undo that truth. By morning, my decision was made. The time for silence was over. Tomorrow, I would confront her. Tomorrow, she would have no choice but to face what she had done. And tomorrow, I would finally find out if there was anything left of the life we once dreamed of, or if everything was already gone. The next few days felt like living inside a storm I couldn't escape. Everything looked normal on the outside, work, home, daily routines, but inside, my chest was tight, like I was dragging a weight that grew heavier with every breath. Every time she touched her belly and smiled, a part of me broke further, because I knew that smile wasn't meant for our child. It was meant for hers and his, the man I still hadn't met, but whose shadow loomed over every corner of my life now. I kept trying to rationalize. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe the message wasn't as clear as I thought it was. Maybe, just maybe, she had an explanation that would make it all go away. But every time I looked at her, I saw the distance in her eyes, the careful way she avoided my questions, the hesitation when I asked about her day. It was like she was rehearsing a lie, practicing it until it sounded natural enough to fool me. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I couldn't be. I started noticing small things I'd overlooked before. Her phone was never out of her sight. If I reached for it, even casually, her hand would dart forward, grabbing it like it was a lifeline. Calls came in at odd hours, and when she answered, her voice was softer, warmer, like she was speaking to someone she wanted to please. Not me. Never me. And the worst part is, she didn't even seem guilty about it anymore. She seemed comfortable, like this double life was just normal to her. One night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling while she slept. Her breathing was steady, peaceful, like she didn't have a care in the world. And I thought to myself, how can she sleep so soundly when I'm lying here questioning everything? How could she rest knowing the truth she was hiding from me? It made me realize something terrifying. Maybe she wasn't afraid of me finding out. Maybe she didn't even care if I did. The next morning, I decided I couldn't live in limbo anymore. I needed answers. So, while she was in the shower, I did something I had never done before. I opened her phone. My hands shook, my heart raced, but I pushed past the guilt, because at that point, the guilt didn't matter. What mattered was the truth, and the truth was waiting for me in her messages. There it was again, the man's name. A string of texts, full of affection, full of plans. He told her how beautiful she looked, how excited he was to start their family, how he couldn't wait to hold their child in his arms. He called her my love. He called her my future. Every word was a dagger, slicing deeper into me. I scrolled and scrolled, my chest burning, until I found the one message that made me feel like the ground beneath me had disappeared completely. It said, "I can't wait until you finally leave him. Then we can raise this baby together, like we were meant to." I don't even remember how long I sat there staring at those words. My vision blurred, my hands went numb, and for a moment I felt like I wasn't even in my own body anymore. She had already made her choice. She hadn't just betrayed me, she planned a future without me, one that included him and their child, and a life where I didn't exist at all. I was nothing more than an obstacle standing in the way of her happiness. When she came out of the shower, I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. She smiled at me like nothing was wrong, kissed me on the cheek, and asked what I wanted for breakfast. I looked at her, really looked at her and I realized I didn't know this woman anymore. Or maybe I never really did. The days that followed were torture. Every smile she gave me felt like a performance. Every touch felt hollow. I couldn't confront her yet, not without a plan, not without figuring out what I wanted to do. Because once the truth came out, there would be no going back. And part of me, as broken as I felt, wasn't ready to let go. That's the cruel part about love. It doesn't just vanish when someone betrays you. It lingers. It claws at you, whispering that maybe, just maybe, things could still work out. But another part of me, the part that had seen those messages, knew the truth. And the truth was this: the woman I loved, the woman I thought I would build a life with, was already building a life with someone else. And she was carrying proof of that inside her every single day. I started distancing myself without even realizing it. I spoke less, I touched her less, I avoided her eyes because I couldn't stand to see the lies in them anymore. She noticed, of course. She asked me if I was okay, if something was wrong. I wanted to scream at her, to throw the phone in their face and demand an explanation. But instead, I just nodded, forced a smile, and said I was fine. Because what good would it do? The damage was already done. At night, I'd lie awake again. But this time, I wasn't staring at the ceiling, I was staring at the wall, imagining a future where I wasn't part of her story anymore. A future where another man was holding her hand in the hospital room, kissing her forehead as she brought their child into the world. A future where my name would fade from her lips, where my place in her life would be erased as easily as a line of text on a phone screen. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in denial. I had to choose between pretending everything was fine or walking away before the lie consumed me completely. One evening, she sat across from me at dinner laughing about something on her phone, and I realized that laugh wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to him. It belonged to the man who had stolen her heart, her loyalty, and the life we were supposed to share. In that moment, I knew I couldn't stay. Not like this, not when the truth was staring me in the face. So I made a silent promise to myself. I would confront her. I would demand honesty, even if it destroyed me, because the truth was already eating me alive, and I refused to let it kill me completely. The weeks after I left her were a blur of emotions. Some days I felt a sharp anger that burned hot in my chest, as if betrayal was fueling me. Other days I felt nothing but an empty, cold silence that wrapped itself around me like a heavy blanket. It wasn't just that she cheated. It was the way she stood there, smiling at me, pretending that baby was mine. The lies cut deeper than anything else. I could forgive mistakes, I could forgive weakness, but I couldn't forgive being made a fool in my own home. And that's exactly what she turned me into. The father-to-be in a story that wasn't even mine to claim. I thought moving out would make things easier. I thought distance would clear my head, let me put the pieces back together. But instead, every corner of my new apartment reminded me of the life I had lost. The way her laugh echoed in my memory when she used to call me unexpectedly. The scent of her perfume that still lingered on my clothes long after she was gone. I wanted to hate her so badly, but the truth is, love doesn't just switch off. You can't snap your fingers and erase years of shared moments, whispered dreams, and promises made in the dark. And that was the cruelest part. My heart still wanted her, even as my mind screamed that she destroyed me. Meanwhile, the gossip started to spread. Friends who had always smiled at us with admiration now avoided my calls. Some of them already knew. They had seen the whispers, the messages, the looks she gave to someone else when she thought no one was watching. And they kept quiet, letting me walk around blind, while my entire life turned into a performance for people who already knew the ending. It made me question not just her, but everyone I trusted. If they knew and said nothing, what did that say about me? Was I really that blind, or did I just not want to see the truth? And then the pregnancy became the talk of the town. I couldn't go to the grocery store. I couldn't even grab a coffee without hearing someone mention it in hushed tones. She's glowing. She looks so happy. He's going to be a dad. Each word cut me down a little more. Because I knew she wasn't glowing for me. She wasn't happy because of me. And I wasn't the one becoming a dad. I was the outsider, the ghost in a life I once thought was mine. That baby growing inside her was proof of everything I wasn't. Proof of the man she really wanted. Proof that I was nothing more than a placeholder until the real thing came along. One night, I sat on my couch staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing in from every angle. My phone buzzed. It was her. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Her voice was soft, almost desperate. "I miss you," she whispered. "I wish things were different." My throat tightened, and for a second, I almost believed her. I wanted to. I wanted to step back into that lie where she was mine and I was hers. But then I remembered the message, the one that shattered everything. "I can't wait to meet our baby." Those words would never leave me. They were etched into my memory like a scar. So I stayed quiet. After a long pause, she said, "I wish you could forgive me." And then, just like that, the line went dead. I couldn't sleep after that. Her voice echoed in my head, mixing with all the what-ifs and maybes. Maybe if I had paid more attention. Maybe if I had been more present. Maybe if I had fought harder to keep her. But deep down, I knew the truth. None of those maybes mattered. Cheating wasn't about me being absent or inattentive or imperfect. It was about her choice. And she made it. She chose him. She chose to lie to me. She chose to let me build a future around a baby that wasn't mine. And once I accepted that, the fog in my mind finally began to lift. But the hardest part wasn't losing her. It wasn't even losing the life I thought we had. The hardest part was letting go of the dream of fatherhood. For weeks, I had imagined what it would be like to hold a tiny baby in my arms, to hear them cry for the first time, to see my reflection in their eyes. I had already started picturing the future, the birthdays, the first steps, the late-night feedings where exhaustion turns into laughter. And now, all of that was gone. Not because I wasn't ready, not because I didn't want it, but because the child was never mine to begin with. That dream had been ripped away before it even had a chance to take root. It's strange how betrayal forces you to grow up faster. I wasn't the same man anymore. The version of me that believed in her unconditionally, that trusted her words, that believed love was enough, that man was dead. What replaced him was someone harder, someone sharper, someone who understood that not everyone who claims to love you actually does. And as painful as it was, I started to see that maybe this was the lesson I needed. Maybe the universe had torn her away from me because she was never meant to stay. Still, the nights were the worst. That's when the silence got too loud, and my mind wouldn't stop replaying the moment I found out. The way her face froze when I said I saw the message. The way her lips trembled when she realized I knew. The way the color drained from her cheeks when she understood that the mask had finally fallen. Those images haunted me, reminding me that love can turn into lies in an instant. And yet, a small part of me still wondered if she thought about me. If she ever lay awake at night, hand on her belly, wishing it were me beside her instead of him. That part of me, the hopeful, naive part, refused to die completely. But I buried it deep, because I knew if I let it live, I'd go running back, and I couldn't. Not this time. I didn't know where the road ahead would take me. I didn't know if I'd ever find love again, or if I'd ever trust someone enough to let them back into my heart. But I knew this much. I survived the worst. I faced betrayal head on, and though it broke me, it didn't destroy me. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.